The morning mist hung low over Silver Pine Lake, wrapping the world in a soft, gray hush. I was casting my line from the community dock, savoring the quiet, when a voice slides through the dawn like a foghorn through a dream. 911. Yes, I need. Officers here now. Someone's fishing illegally on our dock. Her voice shrill, commanding. An unmistakable Sharon Blackwell's climbed to a pitch that could wake hibernating bears. He's ruining our lake. He's probably killing endangered species. I kept my eyes on my bobber, refusing to give her the satisfaction of a glance. The water lapped gently against the dock, a serene contrast to her chaos. Then my line went taut. The rod bent in a way I'd never seen in 25 years of fishing. Whatever was on the other end wasn't just big, it was colossal. That's when Sharon's scream shifted from outrage to raw, bone-chilling terror. Because what came up from the depths wasn't a fish. It was something no one could have predicted. Let me take you back to the beginning. 3 months ago, I packed up my life and moved to Pine View Estates, a gated community nestled around the shimmering waters of Silver Pine Lake. The real estate agent had sold me on the promise of tranquil mornings, lakefront views, and a tight-knit community where neighbors waved and life moved at a slower pace. What she didn't mention was Sharon Blackwell, the self-proclaimed guardian of Pine View's rules and the president of our homeowners association. Sharon wasn't just a busybody, she was a one-woman enforcement machine, armed with a rulebook, thicker than a city phone directory and a personality sharper than a tack. I got my first taste of Sharon's reign during my first week in the neighborhood. I was unloading groceries when I heard the unmistakable click-clack of heels storming up my driveway. "Mr. Davidson," she barked, her voice carrying the authority of a drill sergeant. "Your recycling bin is 1 inch too close to the curb." HOA regulations clearly state a minimum of 18 inches from the street edge. I blinked, still holding a bag of apples, and pointed out that the bin was exactly where the previous owner had left it. Sharon's eyes narrowed, her lips pursing, into a line so thin it could have doubled as a razor. "Rules are rules, Mr. Davidson," she said, handing me a neon yellow violation notice with her signature scrawled across it like a royal decree. That was just the start. Over the next few weeks, Sharon's citations came faster than junk mail. My mailbox was slightly misaligned by 1/4 of an inch. My front porch light was too bright at 60 watts. My dog, a lazy golden retriever, named Max, was apparently disturbing the neighborhood aesthetic by napping on my lawn. Each notice arrived on official HOA letterhead, complete with Sharon's looping signature and an excessive number of exclamation points. It was clear she didn't just enforce rules, she invented them. But the community dock, that was her kingdom. Sharon had crowned herself dock marshal, a title that appeared nowhere in the 200-page HOA handbook I'd memorized like a lost student. Cramming for the bar exam, page 47, section 12. Subsection C was crystal clear. Residents could fish from the dock during daylight hours, provided they practiced catch and release. I'd highlighted the passage in neon yellow and kept a laminated copy in my tackle box. Knowing trouble was inevitable, that morning, I'd arrive at the dock at 6:10 a.m., just as the first rays of sunlight kissed the lake's surface. The air was crisp, the water still as glass, disturbed only by the occasional ripple of a fish breaking the surface. I set up my gear with the precision of a surgeon, rod assembled, line checked, hook baited with a wriggling nightcrawler I'd unearthed from my garden. I'd been fishing for 15 minutes, lost in the rhythm of cast and retrieve, when I heard the rapid, aggressive click-clack of heels on the wooden planks. Sharon Blackwell was coming, and she was on a mission. Excuse me, sir," she shouted from 50 feet away, her voice echoing across the lake like a siren. I turned slowly, keeping my face neutral. Sharon stood there in a neon purple tracksuit that seemed to glow in the dawn light, her bleached blonde hair pulled into a bun so tight it looked painful. "You cannot fish here," she declared, pointing a manicured finger at me. "This is private property, and fishing is strictly prohibited." "Good morning, Sharon," I said, my voice calm as the lake itself. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" Her face flushed a shade of red that rivaled the sunrise. "Don't you good morning me, Mr. Davidson. You're in violation of HOA regulations, and I demand you leave immediately." I reached into my tackle box and pulled out my laminated copy of the guidelines. "Actually, Sharon, according to page 47, section 12, she snatched the paper from my hand before I could finish, her eyes scanning the text like a hawk searching for prey. I watched her face cycle through emotions, confusion, denial, then pure, unfiltered rage. "This is outdated," she snapped, crumpling the paper into a ball. "We changed this rule at last month's board meeting." "Really?" I said, keeping my tone even. "I didn't receive any notification of a rule change." "Don't those require a community vote?" Her left eye twitched, a telltale sign I'd hit a nerve. "Are you questioning my authority?" she hissed. "Not at all," I replied. "I'm just trying to enjoy my morning, which is my right as a resident." Sharon's hand shot to her phone, wielding it like a weapon. "We'll see about that," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "I'm calling an emergency board meeting, and the police. You're disturbing the peace, damaging the ecosystem, and scaring the ducks." I glanced at the ducks in question, who were happily paddling 20 feet away, completely unfazed by my presence. "Sharon, I'm using barbless hooks for catch and release. It's perfectly legal." "Legal?" she laughed, a sound like nails on a chalkboard. "I decide what's legal here. This is my community." "I thought it was our community," I said, unable to resist. That was the spark that ignited the powder keg. Sharon's voice hit a pitch that set nearby dogs howling. "You think you're so smart, don't you? Moving in here with your big city attitude, thinking you can do whatever you want. I've been president of this HOA for 8 years. I've dealt with troublemakers like you before." She spun on her heel and stormed off, her phone already pressed to her ear. "Police? Yes. I need you here immediately. Pineview Estates. A man is fishing illegally and refusing to leave. He's being aggressive." I sighed and turned back to my fishing. If Sharon wanted to waste police resources, that was her prerogative. I'd done nothing wrong, and I had the documentation to prove it. The next 20 minutes passed in blissful silence. The fish weren't biting, but the morning was too perfect to care. A great blue heron landed on a piling nearby, its ancient eyes studying me before deciding I was harmless. The sun climbed higher, burning off the last wisps of mist. Then I heard them, multiple footsteps on the dock, a parade of authority led by none other than Sharon Blackwell. "There he is," she announced, pointing at me like I was a fugitive on a wanted poster. Behind her were the HOA board members Gerald Morrison, a retired accountant with a permanent frown, and Linda Yates, a soft-spoken librarian who always seemed uncomfortable in Sharon's presence. Trailing them were the police officers, their expressions screaming they'd rather be anywhere else. The older officer, whose badge read Patterson, stepped forward. "Sir, we've received a complaint about illegal fishing," he said, his tone professional but weary. I nodded politely. "Officer, I'm a resident here. Fishing is permitted according to our HOA guidelines. I have a copy if you'd like to see it." Before Patterson could respond, my rod nearly jumped out of my hands. The line went taut, the reel screaming as something massive pulled against it. This wasn't a bass or a catfish, it was something else entirely. The dock fell silent, even Sharon pausing her tirade to stare. "He's probably snagged a log," she scoffed, but her voice lacked conviction. I ignored her, focusing on the fight. The thing was heavy, moving in a way that didn't feel like a fish. It zigzagged, then surged, nearly yanking the rod from my grip. Sweat beaded on my forehead. As I worked the reel, careful not to snap the line, the officers stepped closer, their boredom replaced by curiosity. Even Gerald and Linda leaned in, intrigued. "That's a big one," Patterson said, a hint of excitement in his voice. The crowd grew as early morning joggers and dog walkers stopped to watch. After what felt like an eternity, I saw it break. The surface, dark, angular, and definitely not a fish. Gasps rippled through the crowd as I halted closer. It was a metal box about the size of a carry-on suitcase, covered in rust, lake weeds, and tangled fishing lines from years past. A frayed rope handle dangled from one side. "He planted that," Sharon shrieked, her voice cracking. "He threw it in there just to pull it out. This is staged to make me look foolish." Patterson held up a hand. "Ma'am, please step back." He pulled on latex gloves and knelt beside the box as I swung it onto the dock. The metal was corroded, but faint engraving suggested it had once been ornate. "This has been down there a long time," he muttered. He tried the latch, which was rusted shut. "Jenkins, get the pry bar from the cruiser." The younger officer jogged off, and the crowd pressed closer, their murmurs growing louder. Sharon stood frozen, her face pale, her usual bravado gone. Gerald spoke up, his voice thoughtful. "You know, I remember something about a burglary in the 80s. The Warrington place, over on Elm Court. They never recovered the stolen items." Jenkins returned with a pry bar, and Patterson pried open the latch with a groan of rusted metal. The lid creaked open, revealing a treasure trove wrapped in tattered plastic bags, jewelry boxes, documents in protective sleeves, and old photographs. One photo, less waterlogged than the others, showed a young couple standing in front of a house. On the back, in faded ink, was an address right here in Pine View Estates. I'll be damned, Patterson whispered. He grabbed his radio. Dispatch. This is Patterson. We need a detective at Pine View Estates. Possible evidence in the Warrington cold case. The Warrington case? Linda gasped. Eleanor Warrington still lives here. She's in her 90s now. Over on Elm Court. Sharon tried to regain control. This doesn't change anything. He was still fishing illegally. I demand you cite him. Patterson stood, fixing Sharon with a stare that could stop traffic. Ma'am, this gentleman just recovered evidence in a 30-year-old burglary case. Not only was he fishing legally, I checked your HOA documents, but he's done this community a service. He paused, his voice turning stern. Furthermore, filing a false police report is a misdemeanor. You claimed he was aggressive and fishing illegally. Both are demonstrably false. The crowd buzzed with excitement. Phones already out, spreading the news like wildfire. Sharon's face drained of color, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Within an hour, the dock was a crime scene. Detective Murray arrived, meticulously cataloging the box's contents. Eleanor Warrington was brought down in a golf cart, her daughter steadying her frail frame. When Eleanor saw the jewelry, her eyes welled up. My mother's pearl necklace, she whispered, pointing to a strand that had survived decades underwater. And Harold's watch. Oh, my Harold's watch. She clasped my hands, her grip surprisingly strong. Young man, you've given me back pieces of my life I thought were lost forever. How can I ever thank you? I'm just glad I could help, ma'am, I said, feeling a warmth I hadn't expected. By noon, the story had spread through Pine View Estates like a summer storm. By evening, the local news had picked it up. Local fisherman solves decades-old mystery. But the real drama unfolded at the emergency home meeting that night. The community center was packed, every seat taken, neighbors standing along the walls. Sharon sat at the board table, her usual commanding presence replaced by a hunched, defensive posture. Gerald stood first. I moved to address this morning's events, specifically the false police report filed by our board president. Second, Linda said, her voice firm. Sharon tried to protest. I was protecting our community. I've always protected our community by harassing residents. Gerald shot back. By inventing rules that don't exist. You told the police Mr. Davidson was aggressive. You could have gotten him arrested on false charges. I've had 20 complaints about your behavior this month alone, Linda added, holding up a thick folder. Intimidation, harassment, abuse of power, and now a false police report. The vote was swift and unanimous. Sharon was removed as HOA president, effective immediately. As the gavel fell, she stared at the table, her empire crumbling around her. But the consequences didn't end there. The next morning, Officer Patterson returned with papers. Sharon, still in her bathrobe, opened her door to find herself charged with filing a false police report, a misdemeanor carrying a fine of up to $5,000. $5,000, she gasped, her voice breaking. But I'm the victim here, ma'am, Patterson said, his tone unyielding. You wasted police resources and could have caused serious harm to an innocent person. The fine is lenient. You could be facing 6 months in jail. Jail. The word came out as a whisper. For the first time since I'd met her, Sharon Blackwell was speechless. Over the next week, the neighborhood buzzed with the story. Eleanor invited me to her home, where she showed me old photos of her and Harold, the original owners of the stolen items. The police continued their investigation, using the box's contents to track down leads in the Warrington case. As for me, I kept fishing, though now I was greeted with smiles and waves from neighbors who'd once kept their distance. Wary of Sharon's wrath, the dock, once her domain, became a place of community again. Kids fed ducks, couples strolled, hand in hand, and I cast my line in peace, knowing I'd hooked more than just a mystery that morning.